Through an Norbertine priest by the name of Father Jacob Shea to begin a fully professional musical ensemble. His vision was to revive the illustrious history of musical patronage that musical order or that religious orders like the Jesuits, the Premonstratensians, and the Piarists had in the 17th and 18th centuries, to bring the new musical styles which developed in Italy after the Council of Trent up to Northern Europe. So we've created, like I said, a fully professional ensemble to bring these compositions of our Catholic musical patrimony here to the United States. The vast majority of the compositions we perform have never been performed in the United States before. They've either been performed only in Europe, or they have only come to us in manuscript sources, which I personally transcribe. And it's been a long but very rewarding journey. I invite you to come hear us. We're doing the music for the Sacred Triduum at St. Peter and Paul in South LA this March. St. Peter and Paul is remarkable in that it's a very poor parish. We do not, unlike most classical music cooperatives, we do not benefit from a network of a small number of well-heeled benefactors. Rather, we take advantage of the economies of scale of a very large number of poor benefactors who are very enthusiastic about our project to bring these very large-scale compositions from chapels royal, prominent basilicas, and oratories of Europe to a needy community here in Los Angeles. So again, I invite you to come hear us in March. We were also given the great opportunity of performing the closing mass at the Legatus National Convention at the end of this month down in Dana Point. We are still looking for benefactors to help us fundraise to that end. So please let me know if you're able to help us. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit organization with our own bank account, and our mission, I'd say our non-stated mission, is to glorify God and to save souls. But our official mission is to bring the masterpieces of the classical musical patrimony fully into the classical music repertoire and into the musical canon here in the United States, to bring attention to the treasures that our church has produced over the past 4 centuries. So thank you again for your welcome. Thank you again for having me back after this past decade. And thank you for the introduction, Mr. Mulhern.
Do you have a flyer of any kind?
I have a business card.
A website?
Website is musicatransalpina.org.
Sorry to ask.
I'll write it down for you. So the reason for our name, Musica Transalpina, is that after the Council of Trent, during the very famous Counter-Reformation, there was a big sense that there was an all-hands-on-deck attitude towards evangelization in the 17th century, which the Jesuits were the most invested in participating in. Not only them, but also the major Catholic ruling families were also very heavily invested in new church architecture, but especially, in addition to architecture, art, sculpture, painting, the promotion of this new style of Catholic sacred music, which at the time was called the stile concertato, concertato as in concert. This style was seen as especially drawing the attention of the senses and effective in the evangelistic goals of the Counter-Reformation. So because of this interest in promoting the Italian style of music, which really caught on north of the Alps, we chose this name, Musica Transalpina. So I'll write that down for you, sir. Thank you for asking. So again, thank you for the invitation, the welcome, and I wish you all a good evening. And thank you again, Mr. Mulhern. I appreciate your hospitality.
Transalpina, across the Alps.
From across the Alps.
From across the Alps. I still do love Italian. Okay, at this point, I'm going to open up the room for any special prayer requests before we bring up our speaker. So, yes, Brian?
For my friend's father, Gary Burke, who died this morning around 12:15 a.m., please offer your prayers. Requiem, the eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord. May perpetual light shine upon him. May he and the souls of all the rest of the faithful departed, mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, come on, Robert.
So one of our members, William Gill, who normally haunts us at these gatherings, is still recovering from his surgery. I spoke with him today. He's doing well and doing better. Did not feel well enough to come, but he expects that you guys will see him here next week. I'm sorry, next month. But please continue to pray for his recovery.
Yes, come on.
Again,
Tony.
I again ask for prayers for my son Anthony.
For your son Anthony, very good.
Thank you.
Special prayers for Mr. Paul Isley, our member who has small cell bladder cancer. Paul's really suffering right now. He's hanging in there. He's got a good attitude. He's got a kick butt attitude, as a matter of fact. He's an A personality. But you know, sometimes we talk on the phone and sometimes he's in tears because it hurts. You know, so keep him in your prayers. Anyone else? Okay.
I have one thing.
Yeah, sure, come on.
My grandmother Bernice is on her deathbed, non-Catholic, but has been experiencing closeness with God, so I pray for her conversion and a happy holy death.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, he's been working on it for about 6 months now. He first approached me in October of last year, and he was really adamant he wanted to make a special presentation. And we're really lucky that we have here Dr. John Burns. His talk this evening is there are flyers, so maybe Edgar
Handouts.
Flyers, handouts, yeah. So if you could maybe pass those out. The presentation is entitled
Right there in that basket.
Miracle on 34th Street, apropos of Associate Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson of the United States Supreme Court, SCOTUS. Coming up, Dr. John. Let's give it up for Dr. John.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, appreciate it.
Is your light?
Terrific. Okay. I'm John Burns, and I'm a family practice physician. And so tonight, this discussion is aimed at discussing the existence of Santa Claus, the existence of women, aided by the light of faith and the light of science and the United States Constitution, federal law. Okay, so this talk is really in two parts. The first part is about a movie. It's a fairy tale. It's a fantasy, but I also consider it to be sort of a parable. It's one of the more popular Christmas time movies, along with It's a Wonderful Life and A Christmas Carol. Miracle on 34th Street is really sort of a legend in its own time. The second story concerns our present time and our condition of our culture and our society, is exemplified by statements that were made by now Associate Justice Jackson. Okay, so both of these stories, the one about the 34th Street miracle and in reference to Judge Jackson and our present problems with the virus of wokeism, in both of these stories, we're going to see the role that faith interacting with science, interacting with the law, Supreme Court law, the law of the land, how they interplay with each other. So let me cut to the first story, a little movie lingo there. In 1947, 20th Century Fox produced and released a movie called A Miracle on 34th Street. And some of these actors, actresses you may be well aware of, the little child, Susan in the movie, became America's sweetheart, replacement for Shirley Temple, and that was Natalie Wood. She played the part of the 6-year-old girl in the movie, Susan. Her mother is Maureen O'Hara, And John Payne plays the part of her lawyer boyfriend. And a grand old actor, Edmund Gwynn, plays Kris Kringle, AKA Santa Claus. So what we have here basically is the movie is really based on true facts. I mean, Macy's does have a Thanksgiving Day parade every year. And in this story, the hire-on who's supposed to play the part of Santa Claus, should we say, this isn't Thanksgiving, but he's already started drinking too much Christmas cheer. He's not fit for duty. He is not good to go. So Macy's desperately needs a replacement. They do not want to disappoint thousands of potential customers, namely the parents and their children. So they hire on this gentleman. He refers to himself as Kris Kringle. And he not only does a fantastic job as Santa Claus, but he becomes a beloved member of the Macy's employees' family. He preaches, well, I shouldn't say preaches. He discusses and talks about the importance of love, faith, and defends those employees who are being picked on by the villains, which is known as HR, which we know of today. He even goes so far as to recommend to Macy's customers that if they can't find it at Macy's, he's got a list of other stores they can go to find kids presents for their kids. So yeah, exactly. So at first, this is met with definite hostility by the powers to be in management and marketing. But the guy who runs the Macy's says, wait a minute, this is not such a bad idea. This could show that Macy's has a heart, after all, and we care most about our customers and their kids. So as time goes on, however, it becomes rather obvious that management does not like Kris at all. And as a matter of fact, he's challenging their power structure. He's doing things that they don't like. He's shifting leadership from them to ideas like love and faith and kindness, and that profits are okay, but they're not everything. So he's got to go, okay? So the idea is this. They figure out what they're going to do to this man who talks of faith and love. They're going to take him to a magistrate. Beginning to sound familiar. By the way, Kris is short for Christopher, which I believe is Latin for Christ bearer. So in my mind, that's sort of what Kris is in a certain sense. He is a Christ figure, and basically. Among the people that he encounters at Macy's, Maureen O'Hara does work there, has connections there, and she has a little girl by the name of Susan. Now, in the story, apparently she is either divorcee or she was abandoned by the father of the child, Susan, and she's rather a cynic. And she doesn't want Susan brought up any other way. She doesn't want her believing in fairy tales. She doesn't want her believing in myths, things that can't come true, like, well, true love. And she wants her to be fact-based. She wants her to believe in things that she can find a factual basis for. This 6-year-old here, she's telling these things. And Kris's message is, look, especially with children, they've got to have things to believe in that they can't really see, but that they can know of, like love, like faith, like believing in something more than themselves. And Santa Claus may be a temporary belief, but it can lead to bigger and better things, and he's alluding to religion. Although this is not a Catholic film per se, I think there is a lot of Christianity in it. What happens is that he begins to win Maureen O'Hara's character over. She in turn enlists her boyfriend lawyer to help with their troubles that Kris is having. And the little girl begins to believe, well, maybe there could be a Santa Claus, as Kris is telling her. But she wants to confirm her faith. She wants a confirmation. And she tells Kris, you see this magazine, Homes and Gardens? I want that house. If you're really Santa Claus, you get that house for me and I'll really believe in you. I mean, I'll try, because that's all Kris is asking for, is at least be open to faith in the meantime, believing that I can help you. So Susan knows what she wants and she makes it very clear. Okay, now what happens is that the charge is brought against Kris that he's insisting that he's a mythological creature being, namely Santa Claus. And he goes before court, and John Payne is trying to do the best he can to prove that he is sane, He may think he's Santa Claus, but what's the harm in that? And Macy's is bringing up the point, look, where does this end? He thinks he's Santa Claus. What if he imagines some night that he's George Armstrong Custer, and the next thing you know, he's shooting at people and leading an army? I mean, people could get killed, people could get hurt. This could lead to bad things. So in the meantime, the New York Times has a problem. And the problem is they have a dead letter department. And at every Christmas time, there are thousands of letters written to Santa Claus. Okay? The problem this Christmas, because now we're getting to Christmas season as the movie progresses, is that there are tens of thousands, almost 100,000 letters have come in, all addressed to Kris Kringle, Santa Claus, at the municipal court. So the guy who's in charge of the dead letter goes, yeah, what are we going to do? Oh, wait a minute, I have an idea. So with that, the day in court comes, and by the way, this judge has a problem on his hands. He doesn't want to be known to his children as the guy who said, this guy who says he's Santa Claus is nuts, I'm going to put him in the nut house, and there really isn't any Santa Claus. Doesn't want to go there. So John Payne's character says, will it please the court? This court is sworn to uphold the laws, the city of New York, the state of New York, and the laws of the United States and the Constitution. If I can show the court that the government of the United States recognizes Kris Kringle as Santa Claus, if I can submit this to the court with sufficient evidence, will you declare indeed that Mr. Kringle is sane, that he is Santa Claus, and release him and not put him in an institution? The judge is exasperated, says, okay, go ahead, try it, let's see what you got. So he says, will the bailiffs please bring in the evidence? And with that, hundreds of sacks are brought into the courtroom. Dozens of bailiffs are involved, and they're headed right towards the judge's bench, and they're dumping these letters on the bench, and it's all Kris Kringle, Santa Claus, care of the court of the state of New York, municipal, and he reads some of these, these requests, and the judge says, indeed, in my opinion, you have demonstrated that the government of the United States, the Post Office General, has delivered these letters to Mr. Kringle, and he is in fact sane, and Santa Claus really does exist in his person, and we're going to release him. Okay. Now, one little point aside, because we're talking about science here too, and at this time in 1947, there really isn't an argument about what a woman is, what a man is, and what the family is. Okay? Especially Macy's, which is a very hard-headed group of people, especially their competitors. There's no argument about this. So the situation goes on that the family consists of a father, of a mother, and a child. Now, there is what at this time is known as the Hayes Office. Anybody here never heard of the Hayes Office in Hollywood? Do you know what it is? If you watch Eddie Mueller on Film Noir, on Turner Classic Movies, the movies he brings up in the 1930s and the 1940s, there was an office in Hollywood of censorship that was called the Hayes Office. And in this situation, Susan really does need a mother. She does need a mother, but she's going to need a father. She needs a family. So they're sort of, with the guidance of the Hayes Office, as if we need more help in this, they kind of guide this movie along to a mother and father. Maria O'Hara is going to marry John Payne in this movie. It's pretty evident. And Susan's going to have a father and a mother. And the biological role of men and the biological role of women in conception and in pregnancy is pretty much assumed to be scientifically demonstrated and beyond any question. Now, one little aside about this. This is a caveat to the generations that you represent and your children and your grandchildren. If we divide this country into one group, which is Catholic, Evangelical Protestant, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, you know, the melting pot, the rest of us who are sort of, that's us, normal people, believe Catholics against contraception and abortion, at least the evangelicals. I know them as neighbors. They are definitely pro-life and not in favor of mixed marriage in the sense of man and, well, I should say, same-sex marriage. Okay, you have their birth rate Okay? You have a second group, which would be more liberal folks who believe in contraception. They believe that a woman's right to choose means a woman's right to abortion at almost any stage. You have practicing homosexual couples who, outside of intrauterine fertilization, artificial insemination with another person's sperm and a woman's egg, outside of that, they're not going to reproduce. And if these children that are considered to be trans receive puberty-blocking drugs and surgery, they will be sterilized. Jawohl? Einsprechen? Okay. They will not reproduce. Which group, one or two, do you think is going to have the higher birth rate? And? Okay, first group number one, you're probably right. Which group will have the lower birth rate? Well, sort of a crossover there. Well, yeah, the other group that doesn't believe so much in childbirth, some of them are antinatalists. They think the solution to the human race is to eliminate the human race. They wouldn't mind a thermonuclear war, actually. And I'm not making this up, but anyway, lest I digress. The point is this. Where is group number two going to get its stormtroopers from? Where is it going to get its recruits from? Because they're not going to reproduce at anywhere the rate that group number one is. The answer, your children and your grandchildren. This is why education is so important, and who controls that? Controls tomorrow. That's what they're after. Well, that's an aside. Okay, moving right along. So here we have, the trial is over. You have Susan driving along with her parents, her mother and her father-to-be. And she's going to herself, I believe he's Santa Claus, I believe he's Santa Claus, I believe it, I believe. And lo and behold, what comes up around the corner in this neighborhood? The very house that she wants. It's there. She finds it. She gets out of the car. She's running up the steps. She goes inside. He really is Santa Claus. He really is Santa Claus. And Marina O'Hara turns to John Payne's character and she's, it's so great. You rescued Chris. You showed legally that he is Santa Claus. You've done such a wonderful thing. At which point, Payne looks over to the corner where there's a chair. And in that chair is Kris Kringle's umbrella, cane. At which point, he turns to the camera, he turns to the audience and says, oh, I don't know. Maybe I didn't do such a wonderful thing after all. I remember that. Okay, maybe some of you else might remember too. So basically, Susan's faith has been rewarded here. And what we have is a parable, as I said, about faith and how dreams or faith can come true and how important faith is. And how the law and the science, in 1947 at least, was complementary and sympathetic. And I'm not trying to separate faith. I'm not trying to combine church and state here. I'm just saying that they can be very complementary and very important to each other. Okay, now, a little bit earlier than when this movie was made, in the 1890s, a little girl in New York wrote a letter to the New York Times to bring them in again. Her name was Virginia. And she wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times, and she said, "Sir, Mr. Editor, my parents and other kids are saying there really isn't any Santa Claus. You're the editor of the newspaper. Your paper is read by a lot of people. You know a lot of things. Is there a Santa Claus?" And the response is famous. The editor wrote back to Virginia, and he said, "Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus, and he lives in the hearts and in the minds of children and adults alike." So one thought I want to leave with this is to say to all the Virginias that not only should you contemplate Santa Claus, but you too can grow up to be a real woman, defined as such. Okay, the second story, by the way, let me say at this point, my objective here is not to belittle Judge Jackson. It's not to make fun of her or belittle her in any way. I think that she's suffering, as I said, from a virus called wokeism that was introduced to her way before law school. That what we need to do is look upon her as confused, that we hope to shine the light of reason and faith on this as well as the law. And we want to speak truth to power, that is for sure, but we need to do it with love without belittling those or attacking those that we disagree with, defending ourselves for sure, and speaking what we believe to be true. On March the 22nd of 2022, Senator Marsha Blackburn, during the confirmation hearing for Judge Jackson, who was the appointee by President Biden, asked her if she would define for the Senate what the meaning of the word woman is. What does woman mean? The judge's response was, I cannot answer that question in this context in the Senate because, well, I'm not a biologist. Okay, we're on. So I don't really think it's necessary to be a biologist to define the word woman, but since she is asking for assistance, far be it from me to deny it to her. I believe I can be of assistance. I believe the Catholic faith can be. And a particular interest to the judge, so can the laws of the United States, and so can the Constitution of the United States, which creates and delegates and names the different branches of the federal government, judiciary, congressional, and executive, and therefore all of the departments of the cabinet, from the Secretary of Defense to the Secretary of the Interior, and all the other are under, ultimately, the designation and power of the Constitution. The Constitution enables Congress and the President to create these departments, and for the Supreme Court to rule on whether these departments or Congress, which side of the argument you're on, has overstepped its boundaries. Okay. At this point, as a matter of faith, I want to make a quotation from the Bible that you may, this is the Douay Rheims version, Catholic version, that you may be familiar with. And God created man in his own image. To the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So we are the creation of God, male and female. We are the human race, male and female. Our faith teaches this truth. God is a Trinity, a communion or a community of persons. The New Testament tells us that a man shall leave his parents and he shall cleave to his woman, to his wife, and they shall become two in one flesh. And from this union shall come a child. We believe the Father is the first person, the Son, Jesus Christ, is the second person, and the love between them, from that is generated the Holy Spirit. From all eternity, not created, the Son is not created, nor is the Spirit. It's a matter of generation, and we believe that is the Trinity. Science, reason, and law also help to make this implicit idea very explicit in their teachings about impregnation, conception, pregnancy, and birth. Okay, now did we give out the handouts?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody's got one? Okay, I want to call your attention to the prescription blanks. The one on the right upper hand corner, my right upper hand corner, is a controlled substance blank. Okay? The second one is standard fare for prescriptions that are not controlled. This particular blank is used in a hospital. It's really pretty much, there's three, excuse me, on one page, and you will find this model for the non-controlled substance in any pharmacy in the United States, in urgent cares. Your DEA number as a physician is required on the first sheet. I blacked them out in deference to my colleagues, but if you take a light and hold it right over those blacked out DEA numbers, you could see them. But it wouldn't, not that anybody here would ever do anything like this, but there are people out there, can you imagine doctors who sell their services for money, for drugs, to make money? You cannot take one of those DEA numbers and put it onto a counterfeit DEA prescription form that won't take. If you look at the side of this, there's a barcode. That barcode lists every single office, every single urgent care, every single emergency room, every single hospital in the United States is contained in the spaces and in the figures in that barcode. and they're stored in Washington, D.C. at the Food and Drug Administration and in the congressional record who authorized these laws. You can't take one, if you wanted to, if you tried it, you couldn't take one of these DEA numbers and graft it on to a phony prescription blank. It won't take. It's been tried, but it won't take. And the penalties for doing that are very severe. Okay, turn the page. You'll come to 1A, which should be on your marks as 1A. It says testosterone cypionate injection, IM. All right, wait till you catch up with me. Okay. Okay. The thing to know about this in 1A, I want you to look, there won't be a test on this tomorrow, so you don't have to memorize it. The carbon skeleton is for testosterone. There's different combinations of it. This is testosterone cypionate. This is one of the secrets of life. The other one is estrogen. These are chemical compounds. It is this that makes possible male and female differentiation, male and female secondary sexual characteristics, the internal and external genitalia, impregnation, conception. It guides along pregnancy until childbirth. These estrogen does, along with another medication called, or a hormone called progesterone, although it's not as important as estrogen. Estrogen is malignancies. Okay. That was 9. And on page 10, you will see the other part of the secret of life, the other part of the code in the DNA of the genes, and this is the molecular structure of estrogen. It's a bit more complicated than testosterone. Well, I agree. Women are more complicated than men, and there's perfect scientific evidence of it. Okay. Now remember,